welcome to AM News Network presents Summary Judgment. I'm Rachel Baird, and seated next to me is Ed Peruta. This is our weekly Saturday show where we talk about politics, current events, and other things that come to our attention. We're here in Central Connecticut, transmitting live from the American News Media Center. Hi, Ed. You look a little different today. I know you want me to notice.
Why? Because my hair looks perfect?
Well, I don't know about perfect. It's a little musty.
Just call me Edwina. I've identified as a female. I'm going to go into the girls' locker rooms. I'm going to go into the ladies' room. You know, yeah.
Actually, to have hair like that, you don't need to be female. That could go very well on a male. It looks good on you. It doesn't look bad.
It will keep the top of my head warm.
Okay, but we're not here to talk about Ed's hair.
We're not here to talk about it, but I don't have to comb my. I've got nothing to comb anyhow. Okay. All right.
You have so much to discuss this week.
No, I
you
don't.
have so much on your mind.
Listen.
I'm listening.
I know that JC's out there, so I'm going to give everybody, including JC, some forewarning. If you can't get through, don't keep calling back and watch us and figure it out. That number one. Number two.
Oh, so let me get this straight. Now we have rules for the show.
No,
really? We're gonna burden our viewers with rules. You open up the show. You open up the show with a wig, but you're gonna burden our viewers with rules.
I don't think that was burdening anybody.
What is number two? What's your number two rule? What's your number two regulation? I should say. You're gonna regulate the show.
I want to talk about.
That's better.
Legitimate concerns beyond local.
Well, I think local concerns are legitimate.
Unless local affects a larger area, which very often it does.
Well, I would venture to say people's most legitimate concerns are those that happen right there in their house. Those are people's most direct concerns. And then it goes out from there. Because the things that happen right in our house are the things we can affect the most, and the further you get away from your house, the less you can affect things.
I used to do a show called The Kitchen Table News. And I had a saying that more news travels across the kitchen tables of America than all of the news media outlets combined. In other words, the real news is when you're sitting down in your house talking about what's going on. That's the real news.
I got to tell you, people don't do that anymore.
What?
They read their phones, and sometimes they quote what they see on their phone to other people.
You're right, they don't do that anymore, and that's probably a problem.
No, I don't know if it's good or bad. It's just different. Change.
I'll give you the example, okay?
Technology changes everything. That's very Marxist.
The city of Chicago
is a mess.
Well, I had reason to talk to somebody this week about what was Emmanuel's first name?
Rahm.
Rahm Emanuel was the mayor of Chicago. And he withheld from the public the video of the shooting of the civilian 14 times. Boom, 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 everybody shot him. He withheld that video from the public for 14 months, or thereabouts, almost a year and a half. And there was an outcry for him to resign.
When it was released.
Yeah. Oh, why didn't we see it sooner? This, blah, blah, blah.
Did anybody actually ask for it? I'm assuming people asked for it, because to say he withheld it would mean that somebody wanted it.
Trust me when I tell you, somebody was asking for it.
Yeah.
But he didn't resign, and he walked away almost like nothing bad had ever happened during his administration.
Well, they say that's the way
and
to do it.
And I believe that he may even have been appointed to something in the Biden administration. Okay? That's fine. I understand that. Now, Chicago. They've had this thing with the public schools. The teachers versus the administration. They say that it's now going to be resolved and kids are going to be going back to school. Well, that makes me think, why are we sending our children to school in 2021? to a brick and mortar school in 2021. Why? We've just come through and are still in, but just came through a period of time where our schools were closed and people were learning remotely through the use of interactive computer programs. My grandson, Maverick, in Florida, was being educated over the internet by a program that my son paid $80 a month to keep his son on pace because of COVID closing the schools. He's now back in a public classroom, and for a lot of different reasons, but he's back in a public classroom. But I had to ask, why are we funding and staffing brick and mortar schools when we have the technology now to educate those children effectively and remotely from while they're still in their home?
We're not going to know how effective it is until 10, 20, 30, 40 years passes and we have an opportunity to look back on what happened. So we don't know if it's effective or not. But then again, we don't know if going to brick and mortar schools is that effective either. For a lot of kids, it's not.
I was going to say that, but you're right.
Yeah.
I get very thirsty because of the drugs I take.
You're allowed to get thirsty. It's good to drink water.
Now,
I have mixed feelings about it. I really do.
I understand the need to socialize our children, for them to socialize and learn to interact with other people. But we right now, because I was with you the other day, we right now are holding judicial proceedings remotely. It's like you don't have to walk into a courtroom anymore unless possibly there's someone being held. He's in custody, he's in the jail downstairs, and he's brought upstairs to the courtroom.
Yeah, they're not
but even then, the judge isn't there, the prosecutor isn't there, but the defense attorney's probably there standing with him. But we're holding our judicial proceedings remotely. And some states have been arraigning their defendants. The judge is in the court, in his courtroom at the bench, and the accused is in the jail. Doesn't even transport him over to the courthouse. Been going on for years. Why are we paying brick and mortar and teachers' salaries to in some cases babysit children so the two parents can go out working a job? I asked Master Control, because what I do is I don't have time to do a lot of, I go through Facebook and I just look at that bold print and possibly a picture. If it's a video, I don't even watch it. You know, I just go through and read the bold print. How has the editor explained what this story is about? For example, Reporter's Notebook. Chicago schools face a nightmare as Illinois pushes progressive politics.
And what media outlet did that come from?
I think it was on Fox. Okay.
Could have guessed that.
Okay, no. I'll go on CNN.
Okay.
Okay? All right. Democrats' public gun registry bill blasted as frightening anti-police. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
That's a little ambiguous.
Here's the rest of the story. Okay? Now, there are people who wish to make Antifa a domestic terrorist group.
Well, they don't wish to make it. They wish to
label
designate it as. Label it, yeah.
Make Antifa a domestic terrorist group. Montana GOP state lawmaker 20 says. He's 20 years old.
Yeah, I got to tell you, that's a bad bold print right there, because it's almost like Antifa's not a terror group, but he wants to make it that way.
Okay. Now, there's another one, and I can find it very quickly. Okay? And it had to do with hold on. In the COVID bill, there is $100 million for some transit system in San Francisco or out in California. Okay, they want to use $100 million or add $100 million into the COVID bill. Okay, and I'm sitting there saying, what does that have to do with?
See, this is what people do in their kitchens right here. They don't talk. They do that.
Okay, talk.
Oh no! I mean, you were trying to find something.
No, because I don't want to. Okay, House COVID bill includes over $100 million for a controversial Silicon Valley project. What does the Silicon Valley project have to do with the COVID bill? But what happens is, and this is the tsunami effect, we know that there's going to have to be legislation approved by the House, the Senate, and the White House. Without a doubt, you and I can sit here today. Do you think that they're just going to say, we're not going to pass a stimulus bill, we're not going to pass a COVID bill? We know it's going to pass. So everybody reaches into their briefcase and pulls out and dusts off something that was rejected 3 times in a row and says, sticks it into the pile and say, you want me to vote on that? Give me this. You want me to vote? Give me this. And when they pass it, and then we read it, we go, where did that come from?
And the things that the individual senators or Congress people are asking for, it should be things that are for their constituents and help their constituents, and maybe it is. But that's why they're elected, to look out for their constituents, and I think our founding fathers probably anticipated that's the way it would work. Now, if they're asking for things of a personal nature, that's not good.
For themselves.
Right.
I understand that. So let's, okay. Japan bombs Pearl Harbor. Franklin Delano Roosevelt wants a declaration of war from the Congress. And they sit there and say, not unless you give me my Tennessee Valley Authority dam in Tennessee. I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to respond and vote for a, to give you whatever, a war vote, whatever they call it, okay? Unless you give me my dam in Tennessee, because my constituents need a dam. This is the COVID bill. This is a bill, I would think, to help people get back on their feet. I walked into a place the other day that used to be crawling with people working, and it was a sandwich shop. There were 2 people making the pizzas, making the grind. Just 2 people.
And it's hard to say what caused it. Was it the actual COVID, or was it the reaction to COVID? Was it the things that were implemented because of COVID? Were they needed because of COVID? We'll never know, because we won't be able to compare what happened and what would have happened if these measures weren't implicated. So we're just, again, it's going to be something that at least people alive right now aren't going to know.
There are people right now, and
I mean, in Connecticut, we have a less than 3% positivity rate right now.
with COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. You know, I don't know.
I don't know how to feel about some of the things that are going on. I don't know how, for example, if you live in a residence that's funded by HUD, say Section 8 housing. I own a building. Where's the dog? My God.
I don't know.
Section 8 housing or federal housing or whatever, you don't have to pay your rent. Now do you smell it? Admit it. Okay, so you say they don't have to pay their rent.
I'm going to keep talking to you.
The next door neighbor lives in a privately owned dwelling, okay, and doesn't have the luxury of not being able to forego the rent. They got to pay their rent.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't. They're probably going to get evicted. But the people that haven't had to pay their rent, are they eventually going to have to pay that money back that they didn't pay? In other words, we'll increase your rent and you'll pay it off like in divorce cases with child support. You got to pay $10 a week towards arrearage. Okay, are they going to make these people pay it back?
Are you focused on Section 8 housing right now?
No,
or just
I'm
in general?
Section Don. They passed the law, even in Connecticut. It's now legal not to pay your rent if you live in certain types of housing, whether it's owned by the town, the state, or whoever. But if it's government owned, you don't have to pay the rent.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Oh yeah, Lamont came out and he extended it. So you don't have to pay your rent.
Well, I know with buildings owned by private, owners, that there's a standard that you have to meet to not have to pay rent. Everybody thinks that everybody just doesn't have to pay rent, but you actually have to qualify and show your financial circumstances to not have to pay rent, and people are being evicted.
Well, let me ask you.
People are being evicted.
You're the lawyer. Let me ask you a question. I'm a landlord. I rent. I pre-qualify my tenant. I do credit checks, background checks on my tenants, and they move in, and the rent is $1,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And COVID comes, and the government says to my tenant, "You don't have to pay Mr. Peruta." Who the fuck are you to be getting involved in my relationship with my tenant?
I would say, well, we'll look at the law.
Yeah.
Because it isn't just a blanket that they don't have to pay rent. They have to qualify. In other words, if they've kept their jobs and their financial status hasn't changed, they're not going to qualify not to pay rent. Okay? And they're going to be evicted like they would have.
I don't care what the reason is. If you're not paying the landlord the money that you owe the landlord, then you should leave the property.
Well, if you qualify
upon demand,
you don't have to. And are you talking about the right thing to do, or you're talking about the law? The law doesn't require that you leave immediately. There's a notice to quit. There's a summary process action.
I know where we can find $300 million to subsidize those people that aren't paying their private landlords.
Mm-hmm.
At least $300 million. I know where we can find it. It's more, in other words, fortunately, I don't have to deal with banks. But if I had mortgages to pay,
right,
and those mortgages were dependent upon the rental income, because when you go to get a mortgage and you're going to say, I receive rental income as part of your income, okay? And they say, well, we're only going to take 80% of your rental revenue because we have to figure in unoccupied time.
right.
Okay? Whatever it is, where they're not there. Rental income is used by me to justify a loan or a mortgage. Now all of a sudden, going to the bank and they go, fuck you, you could have a COVID tomorrow and you ain't got no income. We're not going to consider any of that rental income as far as your income.
Well, but the banks the banks are in the loan business, so
Oh,
that
okay,
they can make money. They're not going to stop giving loans.
I'll give you one that'll hit home. You ready? A client comes in. You take on a very big case. You enter into a very big case, and there's an agreement of how much you're going to get paid
mm-hmm.
every month or every week. Mm-hmm. But you've got a monstrous amount of work to do. COVID comes, and the government says, you don't have to pay your lawyers. And then you're the one that says, once you're in it, only the court can let you out of it. You can't say to the client, you're not paying me, I quit.
It depends on the case.
You would not like it, and lawyers would not like it, if the government said, you know something, you don't have to pay any of your legal fees, past or present. You can't make any new ones and not pay them, but you don't have to pay past or present legal fees. It's all forgiven. You don't have to do it. Just tell your lawyer to go about doing what they do, but they're not going to get paid.
Yeah, that's a good example.
That's a great, and the legislature would be hot on that in a minute because they're all lawyers.
Right.
If Holleran and Sage Goodwin and Shipman, or Shipman and Goodwin, Pullman and Connolly, realized that none of those lawyers were going to get paid because COVID's here, you can bet there'd be lawsuits filed all over the place if it was lawyers that you didn't have to pay.
Right.
You know.
Well, maybe maybe
been pushed by a certain party, and it's still being pushed. And now it's been pushed so hard that it's exploding in their faces. Okay, Como. Everybody knew what he was doing was wrong. The whole world was screaming against it, but nobody was going after him demanding anything. It took somebody to come forward to finally admit what was going on, or nobody would ever know about Como. We wouldn't even be talking about it. He's a murderer. He goes in jail. That's my opinion. That's my opinion.
I remember when COVID was first beginning, and he was having those news conferences where he would just sit for hours and hours and pontificate about COVID and the people in New York and this and that. And there were people at that time actually talking about him being a potential presidential candidate. And I don't think he was really denying it all that strongly. And I said to Ed, what he's going through now, I said, pride goeth before the fall. And boy, oh boy, does that match exactly what happened to him, because he grew so pompous with all the attention he was getting.
And his brother.
Right, and he wasn't paying attention to what he should have been paying attention to, was, like you say, the nursing homes.
There was an article, believe it or not, it was in the mainstream media. I don't know which side it was on. It was probably Fox, but whatever. Here's what happened. When his brother was very popular and doing all of these news broadcasts, his brother was interviewing him and laughing with him.
I watched him at the beginning.
But now that there's a controversy, CNN says it's not appropriate to have the brother interview the governor, who's his brother, because there could be a conflict.
And now there are people coming out, representatives, people in politics, saying that he's a nut. He will call you on the phone in the middle of the night and just start screaming at you.
And threatening. People that say he was threatening. Now, just back up a minute.
This is what happens. But hold on. This is what happens when government's not put in check. No state should allow a governor to be in place for 12 years, first off. None. No.
Okay.
You do your time, you get the hell out, and you let the next guy with the ideas come in. That's what it's supposed to be. Como, I just get fired up if I keep talking about him. But his brother, nobody should be watching CNN. Anybody who watches CNN has got to be out of their mind. His brother should be listed as an accomplice. His brother should not be still in news. His brother should be completely removed from any media organization in the world, and that's why I know CNN is not a true news organization.
JC, listen to this. This is a perfect example of what I was trying to say about the tsunami. Okay?
Right.
Governor Como would never have been able to hold 2-hour news conferences if there wasn't a pandemic tsunami. Okay? The news stations didn't have to pay anybody to get this. It wasn't paid. That free. The governor's talking, let's cover him, let's cover him, let's cover him. And a lot of people were buying into it that this is a great guy. Now all of a sudden, we find out that he was riding a political surfboard. Now, the media was hammering the shit out of Trump.
Right.
You know something? He's not the president anymore.
Well,
but nobody is looking at the current president and playing on his gaffes and his mistakes. Nobody.
We knew that's what was going to happen.
Exactly. In other words, now nobody's paying attention. But this is what I heard, and I read it someplace. Somebody is now looking at what is today and still trying to blame it on Trump.
Well, I said to you when this whole Como thing came out, I said, how are they going to find a way to blame Como letting people die in nursing homes on Trump? But they're going to find a way. It's going to be Trump's fault that Cuomo let people die. I just know it somehow.
I'm
Biden.
going to tell you how they're going to. I'm going to tell you how they're going to do that.
Okay, go ahead.
They're going to send. They could have took that ship, broke it into little pieces, and sent it into a bunch of different cities inside of New York versus leaving it where they did. They made it too hard to get to that boat.
Oh,
Well, the part.
That's why nobody got there, because it was too hard to get there. You know why it was too hard to get there? Because it was going to be a plus for the president, and this is a Democrat-created media hoax that has really overplayed a lot of garbage. And when it comes to New York, my cousin died of COVID in New York. Anybody know that? Did
no.
you know that?
I'm sorry.
Well, are you ready for this? My cousin was already on a ventilator when COVID came in. He had been there for years. He was attacked and beaten with a baseball bat. And they decided they wanted his ventilator, so they, after 4 years, they took his ventilator and listed his death as COVID.
Wow.
My cousin. So I've got no love for Cuomo or his brother.
Well, you know something, JC. Let me tell you something. I'm not gonna get involved in the conspiracy theories. I'm not going to get involved in all of this other shit, but I will tell you this. If the current president is my president, I'm going to give him the respect that he deserves being my president. But when he fucks up, I'm going to pull the rug out from underneath him.
Well, we're not going to hear when he screws up.
But we do hear about it.
You know what?
Wait.
You know what? It's going to take people like us to get to those screw-ups. People like us YouTubers, the smaller news organizations, we need to start sticking our nose into these presidential meetings. We need to start filing in for our press credentials at the White House. I'm talking from every state. Small-time media outlets need to start doing exactly what CNN and the rest of them did. Get in there and just ask questions that mean absolutely nothing but here. Let's just be retort. Let's be stupid.
Rachel and I.
Here's another thing. You guys covered Section 8 and the issues with that. Well, here's something that's been going on a lot of people's not talking about. When I was in Ramona, we had a murder around the corner from our house. You know why we had a murder? Because the renter was telling the landlord he didn't have to pay his rent.
Yeah, no, there are murders over that. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So how do we fix that problem? Because it's now becoming worse. There's more and more of it, and it's not, how are we going to fix that problem?
Who got shot, the tenant or the landlord?
I believe it was the tenant who shot one of the people on the property. I believe it was the tenant that they finally named and arrested.
Wow.
But we were there filming an argument 2 nights prior when the cops were there with forum for hours because they had a heated exchange about the whole COVID not paying the rent thing.
Right.
There were 4 cops at that house. And then 2 days later, one of those people was dead.
JC, we got another call online. We got to go.
JC, I want to thank you for listening to our show today and calling in with some really valuable contributions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Summary judgment. You on the line?
It will. I think it just takes a second. Maybe they'll call back. Maybe something that you, AOC 3.2 million.
Oh.
You have 30 seconds. Go.
I was sitting in my residence, and I have a person that lives in that residence with me, who is a die-in-the-woods liberal, and that has created some tension, to say the least, in my residence.
You're talking about Bassie?
I'm talking about my dog. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there was an announcement made. It wasn't really an announcement. I was asked, do you think I'm going to send $100 to AOC for the issue in Texas? Now, I'm going to look. I got to tell you something.
We still have a caller.
Let's
try it.
Let
You finish.
Let me finish this.
Okay.
My wife is the most giving person in the world. She has always given to save the children and sponsored a child somewhere in the world. And she's done that her whole adult life. She donates to the Red Cross. She donates to the American Legion. She donates to what's the one? American Legion, not the American Legion. What's the bell ringers?
Salvation Army.
Salvation Army, and she wanted to give $100 to Texas through AOC. And I sat in the chair, and initially I went, absolutely not. And then I kind of backed away and said, look, it's your money. You do what you want with it. Okay? Because it's the man in Washington's job to send the money down to Texas in the emergency bill, and he can include an extra $100 instead of taking it out of my wife's checkbook.
Yeah, and he's supposed to be ready for these kind of things.
Absolutely correct. And he's not supposed to drag his feet or blame anything on Trump. You're the president. Print money, send it to Texas.
Not only is he the president, but he did 8 years in the White House.
As a vice president.
As a vice president. He knows his way around.
50-something other years in the Congress.
Right.
Phone call.
Oh, here we go. Let's try it
Summary
again.
judgment. Yes, who is this? Yo, come on.
Nice little music beginning.
Hey, Ed, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, I think there's a whole music.
Go ahead.
Okay. Now we're good. Now we're good, Ed.
Okay.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
Hope you two are doing well. I'm a long-time viewer of the show. First time calling.
Thank
And
you.
I want to speak, Ed, about that Section 8 issue, per se.
Okay, well, first of
I'll
all,
give you a little
what state are you calling from?
Calling from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I'm just in Montgomery County here, way outside of Philadelphia.
He's got that twang. He's got that.
Let's
he's
hear
got
what he
that.
has
Go
to
ahead.
say about Section 8, because I didn't know a lot to talk about that.
So, I'm a journalist at a major news organization. I won't say what name. And I have my contacts within the Department of Human Services in the Commonwealth here.
Right.
Now, I'm also a landlord at, so I know the experience from both ends, from the government side and also from the private landlord side. Plus, I actually live next to Section 8 as well. So here's what we got going on there. So in Pennsylvania, back in March of 2020, when this whole COVID thing hit us on March 13th, when Pennsylvania shut down at least, they shut down. I mean, people were calling up the governor's office for all sorts of things, and they just went into panic because everyone was pretty much sent home to do their work, and none of the Pennsylvanians could reach anyone at the state level. Well, here later on, I find out in June of 2020 that people that were in Section 8 got a letter stating that if you currently receive Section 8 benefits, housing primarily I'm talking about here, you don't have to show proof of income for another 6 months. Or until your next benefit renewal date. So, Ed, here's the true question here that I want to bring up. What makes it where the public servant can't check and verify income status if it has changed with residents just because the public servants are now working from home instead of working at the Capitol building or at the Department of Human Services building, okay? So that's number one. Number two is you can literally have people in Section 8 housing right now that have had an increase in their income, and they're getting away with free housing still.
So think about that, Ed. This raises a very alarming, concerning issue because, of course, this is tax dollar money that is going to people that really shouldn't be going to some people. So that's what I want to talk about. And thank you for taking my phone call. And if you have any questions, shoot away.
Don't go away. First of all, I see a name on caller ID, but can I call you by that first name?
No, why do we need to
You
call
can call me
name?
by.
Why don't we
You
just
can call
talk
me
about
by
the
the
issue?
first name, Ed.
Okay.
Does it start with a J?
Yes, it does.
Okay, Joe.
Yes.
I cannot understand how you can give a benefit like that to a group of people who are tenants. In other words, tenants in
Yeah.
government housing. And
Yeah.
what do the people in the private sector paying rent think when they can't get out of paying their rent?
They're pissed.
Absolutely. In other words, I am fortunate, and I'll tell you how it works with me.
Okay.
I have
Go ahead.
several properties that I rent out, and you can go to
Same
Zillow.
here.
You can go to Zillow, or you can do market research in the area where the house is, and you can find out that they're renting
Yeah.
for $1,500–1,600 a month.
Absolutely.
I charge $1,000. I don't charge
Okay.
15 or 16. I charge $1,000. I don't collect a
I charge
deposit.
1,800.
I don't, huh?
So that's reasonable.
I don't,
I charge this out. Yeah.
I don't charge a security deposit. I don't do that.
Okay.
Because what's
Okay.
what's a security deposit going to do if they've done considerable damage to your property? Nothing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Nothing. Yeah. That's
So
my point.
I have tenants that remain in my properties 5, 6, 7, 10 years they stay there. That's 10
Yeah.
years of I haven't had to paint and recarpet.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times they'll come up to me and they'll say, Ed, we'd like to paint the inside. Can we hire somebody to paint? I go, well, no, we'll do it. They are more than grateful for the fact that I rent below market. But I have
Yeah.
tenants that stay forever. But I screen my
Same
tenants.
here, Ed. Yeah, I screen my tenants as well, Ed.
Now, I would be surprised that if one of my tenants came up to me and said, Ed, because of COVID, I'm not going to be able to pay rent. They don't do that
Yeah.
to me.
I haven't had that issue either, Ed.
But I think that whenever you give what amounts to free rent, because I have not, have you heard, if you're a journalist at a major newspaper, is it print?
Hey, wait.
I am able to go ahead and leave it where it is at TV.
Okay. Are you familiar with anybody down at the Baltimore Sun?
No, I am not, Ed.
Okay, I have a very good friend down there, Matthew Hay Brown. He was a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter up here in Connecticut back in the late 90s. But that's neither here nor there. What I'm trying to say is this. How can this administration or the Trump administration
Yeah.
justify giving free rent to this group of people without giving free rent to that group of people? In other words, pay the landlord instead of the tenant paying, the private sector. Have the government send me their rent check. But if these people aren't going to be paying rent, those people shouldn't be paying rent. But the landlord, the private landlord, shouldn't be hurt by that policy.
You know what, Ed? You know what, Ed? I think what we have to have here in this situation is the same thing of what we have for civil rights. Everyone has to be on an even playing field of where everyone's treated equally. So if you're telling me people in Section 8 are getting away of not paying their rent, well, then you know what you gotta have to do? You gotta have to go to the private sector and tell everyone that rents privately from landlords, you don't have to pay rent because Section 8 doesn't have to pay rent. So I think if you're going to be doing that, you need to treat both sectors the same until you go ahead and get your act together and verify income status. Because I can tell you, Ed, what I've heard from my private sources is that literally the quality of work with these public servants that work in the governor's office and the DHS do less of the quality of work just because now they're working at home. And that's how these people are getting away with income verification, hopefully and temporarily.
So the government is really eating the cost of the Section 8 housing
Right.
if the tenants don't pay. So to equalize it, the landlords in the private sector are going to need to be paid by the government as well for the income they're not receiving from
Right.
their tenants. I don't know how else
Right,
you would
but-
equalize it.
But let me make a quick comment because I want to hear more from Rachel.
That was about it.
No, listen, and I'm probably going to get my ass reamed for saying this.
Oh
Okay.
boy.
Oh, man,
Where would the largest percentage of Democratic voters be in the group of Section 8 or the group that's paying rent?
See, but that doesn't fly because Trump was president. Although this was local level, this is more local. I guess. No, it isn't. It's national. Section 8 is national.
This is state. Well, this is at least for Pennsylvania, but does this go on nationally? I sure bet it probably does.
I'm just trying.
Yeah, I don't know if you can
I'm just
say that
trying
or
to
not.
say, I think that it would be difficult for the government to wrap their hands around compensating landlords for people in the private sector.
I think it would.
They don't know how to treat us equally.
Yeah. No, it's like they aren't treating us on an even playing field here. It's like we're, you know, I feel discriminated against as a landlord, as a private landlord. I feel, why is it I'm not getting the same benefits as the landlord being the government for Section 8?
But Joe,
You know,
if your
it's like different.
if your tenants are paying you, Joe, then you're not really you're not really disadvantaged. The people who are disadvantaged are your tenants, because if they were in Section 8, they wouldn't have to pay, and you wouldn't be worried about it because you'd be compensated by the government. So it's your tenants who are.
I'm going to leave it off here, Rachel. I had tenants that recently, I got new tenants that came in, through this court, because the old tenants said, hey, Russ, this is, you've been with a lowerment of a price, like 200, 300. We really can't do this anymore. Why? Because even though that they still had their jobs, a lot of their bonus pay has been reduced, or they've been cutting workers out of the private company sectors. So it's hurting. What I've seen, it's hurting both the private sector and also Section 8. But that's just my opinion, and that's what I've seen and experienced.
You know, and some of the people that are in private apartments or residences and they're renting may now qualify for Section 8.
Yeah.
You know, so they could actually make private property subject to Section 8. Well, it does work that way.
Oh,
But
no,
anyway,
no.
I don't know.
Listen. If somebody comes to me with a Section 8, if somebody comes to me with a Section 8 voucher, I can't turn them away because it's Section 8.
Right.
As long as they meet my criteria to rent in my building and they qualify, they come in.
Right.
You know, please do me a favor. If you're listening on the other side of the camera, meaning in your living room, at your computer, or wherever, please subscribe to our channels. Please subscribe to our channel.
So I
And-
get notifications whenever you guys go live. I already subscribed to David.
Right.
Thank you.
So I appreciate everything that the viewers do to help us feel good.
I'm grateful that is true. They are making private residences into Section 8 residences because I live right next to one. So thank you guys for taking my phone call.
Call again, keep us informed.
I will.
Bye, Joe.
Thank you, Ed. Bye-bye.
Summary judgment. Hello? Are you there? Call back.
You know, the phone situation has almost become part of the fabric of the show at this point. Our battle with the phones.
Yeah, somehow we're starting to understand how they work.
It's getting better.
I don't know
It's
how
getting better. I think you have to go like this. Okay, until we get that straightened out.
There we go.
I know, I hit you again. Oh my God, I can't read the writing. Democrats, guns. Guns, Democrats. Did we talk about that already?
The Democrats would like to enact, I mean, put it this way. He owns the whole pie, the president.
Yeah.
The House, the Senate, to some degree, and the White House. I believe that they're going to make a move anti-guns. And I have to tell you, the more I think about it, the more I get scared. Because in countries where firearms are illegal, at some point in time, the government went around with a list and collected them. Adolf Hitler had a gun registry and went around and collected everybody's guns. So nobody could rise up against him.
Steve, by the way, Stephen Holbrook, Holbrook, who is a well-known Second Amendment, he writes on the Second Amendment.
Researcher.
He has a book about
Yes.
that, and you could Google it, and it's an excellent book.
Well, okay, let me just say this.
Oh, we have a caller
we
back.
do. Let me just say something. I've been watching a movie on Prime, a series on Prime called McLeod's Daughters.
Oh boy,
It's
you
in
ever.
Australia.
Oh.
It's about these females that have this huge ranch and cows and sheep and horses. And every time there's a burglar in the house, they pick up a little piece of wood to go confront the burglar. And I'm sitting there saying, yeah, they don't have guns down there. That's bad. Okay, here we go. Summary judgment, you're on.
Ed,
Yes.
good morning, afternoon. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
Let's talk about the Section 8 housing. Is that a state-run program throughout the United States, or is it federal?
Federal.
Who gave the authority to those people to waive the rent that the people had to pay, the portion that they had to pay?
You know, Joe, it sounded like from Joe that he said it was local authorities. It may be a combination of local and national that run it, but
You keep talking, Rachel.
I've never had to deal with Section 8, so it's not a subject that I know much about. Do you know much about it?
No, I don't know much about it, but I know this is going to happen in the future. This is going to work against people who rent, because once this is tamped down and we're back to semi-normal again, all the contracts are going to be rewritten by people who own property and rent them. There's going to be clauses in there that say different things to protect the landlord, and the renter is going to be the one that is suffering from this as a result of the things that the government has done.
Yeah, I mean, landlords, for example, attorneys, it's well known that attorneys who practice criminal law tend to get the money all up front, because if things don't go well, then nobody is going to pay you.
Divorce lawyers used to always get the money up front from the husband because it very often didn't go well.
So landlords could start doing the same thing, require more up front in case something goes bad. But I know what you're talking about is clauses in the actual rental agreements, but I'm worried about that because I think the government could say, you know, those clauses aren't valid for the period of
Do
COVID.
you mind if we call you by your first name?
John, that's not a problem.
Okay, John. I Googled while Rachel was interacting. The Housing Choice Voucher Program is the federal government's major program for assisting very low-income families, the elderly and the disabled, to afford decent, safe, and sanitary housing in the private market. A housing subsidy is paid to the landlord directly by the whatever on behalf of the participating family. Now, it said that it was a federal, Section 8 housing is federal, but there are some state and local owned housing authorities. Like in the Bronx, there's like city housing. So they waived the tenants, the government, the city, whatever, can waive the tenants. They haven't done it in the private sector. But if it's a government-owned apartment building, like in New York, or in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, we have elderly housing. In Weathersfield, Connecticut, we have town housing. If the town wants to waive everybody's rent, that's fine. But Section 8 is a federal housing program. That's the answer to that question.
I don't know if it's the full answer though.
It's not the full answer
I think it might be more complicated.
because I believe that it's the federal government, the government entity that owns the rented property doesn't, and they're on Section 8, don't have to pay rent.
Well, this was probably set up by Congress, and if you're saying the tenant doesn't have to pay now because of COVID, who has the authority to say that other than the legislature?
Exactly, because I
Was it part of the COVID bill?
Listen, I am so confused about some of the shit that's going on, because I always thought that we had to have a voice in it. You know, somebody had to let us speak to it, because we would speak against stupid shit.
The one thing I do know, I think I know about Section 8 housing is that if you have a drug felony, you cannot live in Section 8.
Right.
I think.
Right.
I think that's true.
Right. Listen, we got one last call and we got about 5 minutes. Oh, never mind. Keep talking.
Okay, bye.
No. Don't go. John.
I predict that the next phone call will be about Section 8. To answer some of our questions, maybe.
Are you calling about Section 8? Hello? Welcome to Summary. Are you calling about Section 8?
Well, yes and no. Section 8 is actually going to be into the guidelines as, I can't think of her name right now, but she's an attorney. So it's going to be under contract law. So what it does is the states agree to give up some of their rights to comply with the federal law of the Section 8.
I got you.
Oh, like the highways and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what they do is put this under a commerce contract law, which is 9 times out of 10 of every federal law, that's what it is. That's the reason why we have military police. Well, federal comes in here and says, hey, we're going to give you all these goodies, but you're going to let us come in at any given time we want.
Can I call you by your first name?
Yes.
What's your first name?
Joe?
Okay, Joe.
Hey,
Here,
let me
I
ask.
gotta ask-
I want to ask Joe something. I want to ask him if he has electricity.
I do.
Good.
In fact,
I'm glad.
In my area, I have not been without electricity.
Okay.
I live in Texas,
Right.
and I've been extremely lucky.
Good.
Well,
Good.
we're hearing shit coming out. Are you cold? Is it cold down there?
Well, it's starting to warm up. Everything's starting to thaw
Okay.
out now.
Joe?
We're up in the 50s today.
You have prompted me to say something to everyone in the state of Texas, because I know that we go out on News Now Houston. You ready?
Oh, yeah, I love him.
The emergency bill by the president should have Every home in Texas needs to have its own generator to generate electricity and heat in a time like this.
Well,
Every home should have a generator. No. After the hurricanes in Florida, FEMA was giving out generators. And my buddy Chris Reynolds was pissed because he didn't get one. He eventually got one, but he was pissed. He says, everybody else has got generators except me. So I think that everybody in Texas ought to, the electric, correct me if I'm wrong, Texas has its own electric grid.
Yep.
In other words, they don't take electricity from Louisiana, Oklahoma, or New Mexico. They generate, it's their own grid. They own it.
Yep.
Okay, then the Texas Electric Authority should buy everybody a backup generator because the windmills froze solid.
well, Joe, you said you were calling up about Section 8 and something else. What was the something else?
Well, you know, it just kind of all ties in together with Section 8 with federal law. But any type of federal law is a contract between the federal and the states. Without that contract, then, you know, the state of Texas, for argument's sake, is a sovereign state. But once they accept anything from the government, enters the commerce, contract law. So they lose their sovereignty anytime federal gets involved with the state.
And I'm going to give you the perfect example of that. The National Highway Safety Act in the 1950s. In other words, we're going to build an interstate highway system. We're going to come through your state. We're going to take land from people in your state by eminent domain to build the system. We're going to pay X amount of dollars to maintain that road. As long as you agree to abide by our signs and markings to be uniform throughout your state.
Yeah, the drinking age, the speed
Yep,
limit.
That's right. You have to agree to do certain things the feds want in order to get the highway funds. That's bullshit. They never stop the highway funds, even though the states don't give a shit. For example, that's why police officers went from red lights to blue lights. Is the National Traffic Highway Safety Administration enacted it and gave the country, I think, 10 years to come into compliance, and we're out of time. Joe, call next week.
Bye, Joe. Bye, the other Joe, and bye, John. Bye.
Bye-bye.